Good afternoon. Hey, friends. Thanks for joining us this afternoon for more of our succession planning content that we have for 2019. We've had a lot of fun with this content. This is our 7th in the series. You can pick up some of the earlier broadcasts at our website at hingebrokers.com. We kicked off the year with what are your options for exiting your business, followed by what are your options for exiting your real estate, and be sure that you understand those are two completely different assets. You can operate them independently, you can sell them or buy them independently. So there are a lot of really interesting things going on in our early education world relating to both what's going on with buying and selling businesses as well as real estate. Then we talked about what to do now to prepare for your exit, because in a perfect world, we like to work with people years ahead of a potential exit. And also I say to people all the time, if maybe you're not planning an exit, but first of all, you never know when you might need to exit for some reason. But also, what if someone knocks on the door and wants to write you a really big check? You want to at least be prepared for the opportunities that might come your way. We talked in the 4th month about building your bench. In other words, how do you grow your team to take over and make your business attractive to a successor buyer? Because your main goal in life and your business is to work your way out of a job. I know that sounds great. You won't ever do it 100%, but to the extent you can grow a team that can manage your business for you, you'll be much more successful. Then we talked about what is the buying and selling process. While we mainly work with sellers, we know a lot of our clients are in buy mode right now because economically we're doing well and it's a great time to consider growth. So everything that we talk about in this series can be applied equally to selling your company or buying another company. And then last month, we talked about what the diligence process looks like. So what we mean by diligence is what happens between the time that you get an offer and you accept it and you close on your business. And so often we have sellers get an offer on their business, they agree to it, and they check out a little bit emotionally. It's really important to continue to operate your business during that process. And often it feels like you have 2 jobs at that point. You're running your business and you're preparing it in the diligence process for the sale. So we have a very special guest to talk about that today, who I'll introduce in just a minute. We're going to get into the real nitty-gritty of what is diligence. What do you need to ask for if you're buying a business? Your objective there is to be sure that what you paid for is exactly what it appears to be. It's to protect yourself against future liabilities and really get the information you need to understand the asset that you're buying. So, and also just to be prepared if you ever have a selling event, so you know what to look for. You start to gather this information and create it on a regular basis, so you're not really caught off guard and having to scramble to get some of the information, because it can be daunting. It can be extensive and frustrating. So we try to make it as easy as possible for our sellers, and this is one step toward that effort, when we want you to understand way in advance what you might be asked for. We have seen an increase in what buyers, our national and larger regional buyers, are asking for these days. They're more conservative than they used to be, and they ask for more information. So to get prepared way ahead of time is important. So before I turn it over to our guest, there are a couple of Hinge events going on I want to be sure that you guys know about. So for today, I'm going to tell you about a few of those. I'm going to turn it over to our guests, and then we'll leave time at the end for some questions. There's a question bar on Zoom. Mine is actually appearing at the top of my screen right now. It may appear at the bottom of your screen. but you'll see a panel for Q&A. Please, as you think of those, put them in. I'll monitor for questions and jump back on at the end to moderate those and be sure that we get your questions answered. We typically run out of time, but if we don't get to your question, we'll get back with you with an answer on that. So a couple of things going on at Hinge in the next 6 months. Well, I'm going to tell you about it, and then I'm going to tell you it's sold out. We do an annual financial event called Thrive. Thrive is a one-day event that is designed to help you understand and know how to more properly manage your financial situation in your school. It helps you know what your numbers should be in each expense category. We talk a lot about tuition rate setting and discounting and accounts receivable management. Hopefully I haven't put you to sleep already. It's a lot of fun, and we try to keep it very engaging. We limit that event to 100 participants, which is why we're sold out, because we want to give you a lot of individual attention. And this year we have added on a feature where we are collecting financial information from our guests in advance, so we can analyze the information, have a one-on-one meeting with them the afternoon before, and help them know what to pay the most attention to the next day. In other words, what parts of what we're going to talk about are their biggest opportunity for improving their financial health. So if you'd like, typically we'll have someone who can't come for one reason or another. So, excuse me, if you'd like to get on our waiting list for that, just let us know. We typically do that in September. And of course, we'll have one next year as well, if you're interested in staying on that list. On September 16th, we will begin registration for our annual business and financial conference Shift. We're in Miami this year. These are actual photos of our venue. So Miami in February, who can beat that? At the very least, it's a great place to go. We do limit that to 300 guests and typically sell out as well. All business and financial content. It's a great place to make some strong contacts in the industry. We try to treat our guests really well with lots of food and social events and healthy options like morning yoga and infused water all day. And we just have a lot of fun. We are going to have a center tour available this year at the beginning of a new KLA school in downtown Miami. So we're excited about that. And hope you can join us. Be on the lookout for more information on that. If you're not on our email distribution list, either let us know or go to the website and sign up. Said all this already. It is at the Eden Rock, Miami Beach, February 18th, evening of the 18th through noon on the 21st, which ends at Friday at noon, and the hotel has given us a fabulous rate, so consider making that a vacation and hanging out. So I would like to introduce someone very special to our team and to me at this time. Carrie Pergerson is the Hinge transaction manager. Carrie is one of the most delightful people I've ever worked with. And in the face of a lot of lists and documents and tedium and, perhaps unhappy people, Carrie's a breath of fresh air in helping people through the process. She knows it incredibly well. She manages documents. She manages drama. She manages us. And we have asked her to come join us for this masterclass today and really talk about the individual pieces of the diligence that you should be prepared for if you're buying or if you're selling. So Carrie, we'll welcome you to, Carrie and I are going to trade off computers here, and she's just going to jump over here. And I'm going to leave you for a moment and come back in and ask some questions in just a bit. So ta-da, Carrie.
Hi, everyone. Technology is great, and today it's not, so we're sharing a laptop. So today, we're doing a due diligence deep dive. We get a lot of questions about this because it can seem like a daunting task, and it can be a daunting task, but that's why we're here. but I like to break it down. So let's start simpler. Get Kathy's computer. Kathy, you may have to show me how to advance it on here. Here we go. All right, so have you ever heard of Simon Sinek's The Golden Circle? I'm going to use it differently because if you know about Simon Sinek's The Golden Circle, it's truly about management styles. He studied different companies and how their management styles can affect really their overall culture, their brand. But I'm going to use this a little bit differently and break it down. So we're going to start from the inside and go out. So with diligence, I always say you've got to start with your why. Let's think about some whys. During the process, you don't want to lose sight of it. Why are you doing this? Well, some people, they want to sit on a beach and relax. Others have a new business venture, and that actually happens a lot. You think that sometimes it's people who are just ready to retire. But that's not always the case, and we see that a lot. There are others who truly want to stay on with the school, but just they don't want to be the owner. They want to stay and help it develop and grow. They're looking for a partner who has more capital, who can help it grow. So that's another reason why people will look to sell. And then what we see a lot of times are those people who this has been their child, which is now their grandchild. They want to spend more time with family. They might have put 30, 40 years into the school, 20 something, and it's just their time. They're ready to spend time with family and let someone else take it over and just improve it and also keep it going. So the how. How do you even do this? Well, like I said, you've got to start, I like to say, let's start in sections or buckets. Otherwise, if I send you a list, and honestly, people always say, can you send me what a diligence list looks like? Well, that completely varies. It really just depends on the buyer. It can be 16 pages of items. It can be 3 pages. So there is not just a tried and true diligence list. But what all of them will do is they will separate it into sections. And so that's kind of how I like to look at it. Focus on, let's say, typically financial, and we'll go into that in a minute. But when you're thinking about these sections or these buckets, is it just you that has all the knowledge about your school? Or is there someone else who can help you through this process? That can be a director, that can be a manager. A lot of times people use their CPA or their bookkeeper. Someone who you can trust. Obviously, a lot of people do not involve directors in the very beginning. But if you do not have access to your financials or to enrollment, you may need to pull them in earlier than maybe you're thinking. The other part is an upload folder. We will provide that. So some people will just email us all the documents. That's fine. Some people take pictures of documents and email them to me. I've gotten that. I've gotten text with pictures. The easiest way is we provide an upload folder link, and we use a very secure system called ShareSync. And that upload folder link, you can just drag and drop documents into. You can upload documents to them. And then that's where I really come into play. I help organize, sort them. I review them to make sure we have the correct data. We know what each buyer is typically looking for and in what format. So I have to be sometimes the nag, come back and say, well, could you provide it this way, just to help keep the process flowing. So what are those buckets? These are going to be your primary categories, if not all of them. And sometimes it's less than these. So just a quick overview, corporate, and we're going to go over some examples of these different buckets in just a minute. So you've got your corporate documents, documents related to facilities, financial. That's going to be the biggest booger. Your employees, operations and purchasing, marketing, and the marketing can be one of the smaller ones, just depends on what kind of outreach you have. The IT, legal, real estate, and then that gets you closer to closing and to the legal documents that kind of round out the diligence phase. So let's talk about that first bucket. These are some examples. Articles of incorporation, they may be really old. You might have just a paper copy in a file, but try to have these at least where you know where they are, or if you need to reach out to your attorney to get a copy of those. Licenses. So I was surprised by this. I came from a different industry, and I was very surprised to hear that, of course, it's based on the state, that most states don't even require a business license. It's just a childcare license. So I'm sure you've got your childcare license handy, but again, just know where that is. And then this is a good one to have, and a lot of people don't think about this, but have an organization chart or a list of your executive team. You don't have to have huge, doesn't mean you have to have a huge team. And so any of these items that I'm talking about, this can be down to one school, which we do a lot of one school transactions, on up to 20, 30 and up. So no matter the size, it's kind of like a wedding. No matter how small or how large your wedding is, you're going to have the same components. So even if you're a small school, have that organization chart. It just may have you at the top, a director, or maybe you're the owner/director. That's fine. And then you're going to have your teachers, your lead teachers, your assistant teachers, and then any ancillary staff. It's as simple as that. Facilities. No matter if you keep your real estate, let's say you own the facility, or if you lease it, no matter if you own, if you lease, and also no matter if you decide to sell or lease that real estate, you're going to have to provide the same types of materials and documents. You're going to have floor plans. Sometimes people don't have really good floor plans and they just use those evacuation plans that are posted in each classroom, and that's fine. Site plans, again, sometimes those are lost, but hopefully you have those. And a lot of times they are the builder grade or builder size. A lot of times what we'll do is we'll ask someone to go to maybe to Staples or Office Depot. They have these big machines. It runs right through and it'll produce and email to you a PDF that can be 8 by 10, 11 by 12. Or worst case scenario, we just say they're on site. It just depends on if the buyer wants to have those ahead of time. Surveys and appraisals. Some schools have had a phase 1 environmental, or they've had different site surveys, boundary surveys, appraisals for refinancing through the years. Anything that you have on file. That does not mean that you need to go out ahead of time and have these done. If anything, they're going to be done through the process, but if you have any on file or had any in the past, then have those handy. Repairs, it's always good, and you probably have this anyway when you're doing your financials, to know what type of repairs you've had done, especially capital improvements. So if you can keep a running list of that, that really helps as well. Security measures. What security measures do you have in place? Obviously cameras, at front door, safety measures, check in, check out. So having a list of that is vital as well and very helpful. Financial. This is where you really have to remember your why, because you might lose your mind or feel like you're losing your mind just to get the financial piece done. And it is good to start with a financial part because buyers typically are going to look at doing a quality of earnings just to check the financials. And so this is why you submit the financials first and then worry about the other ancillary buckets. The typical look back period is 3 years. Tax returns, balance sheets, profit and loss statements, bank statements. So here's where we run into different situations. There's going to be some schools that have, very smooth systems. They have historicals all saved. They keep, a running comparison from year to year. We have worked with schools who don't use QuickBooks. They just operate off of an Excel spreadsheet. And we've even gone down to working with schools who just operate off of paper. So what that should tell you is no matter what your situation is with your systems, there is possibly a buyer out there who will work with it. They, always say, if you don't have it, you don't have it. And if you don't have it in the right format and can't generate it, well, we'll just work through it. So that's why never feel like you can't sell because of the systems or lack thereof that you have in place or don't have in place. But if you're watching this today and think, well, in 5 years I'm going to sell, start now with organization. Even if you just use Excel or just keep paper books, as long as you can keep those historicals in place where you can pull them up if they're printed, keep them in QuickBooks, just know that this is going to be the look back period that they're at least going to want to look at is 3, possibly 4 years. Bank statements, those are always a pain. So if you want to be super organized, you could start downloading the monthly. If you're using online banking, you could download the PDFs of those monthly statements, keep them in a folder on a secure drive and on your database or your computer. At the very least, you're just going to be downloading those to submit. And it's for any different bank accounts. So that's really the hardest part, is what people consider as the hardest part, are those financials. The easier part of financials are going to be your tuition rate sheets, which we're going to use during the marketing of your school anyway. And also just information on the different payment options you allow, whether it's credit card, cash, checks, auto draft, and so forth, and any deposits that parents pay or registration fees, that type of information. When we talked about this, I presented on this material at our SHIFT conference in Austin, and one running theme that I thought of is, at the very least, again, no matter what systems you have, start Excel spreadsheets. If you can start just tracking information, number one, it's going to help you as the owner or the director run the school more efficiently. If you can start comparing how your finances are running, how your expenses for different categories, that'll let you see a snapshot of how your expenses and revenues are flowing. Employees, this is where it'll really help you if you start tracking this information for different reasons, whether you're ready to sell or not. Keeping a lot of this information in a template or on hand will help you keep your staff more organized as well. So as far as diligence, typically a 3-year period of payroll reports. And the payroll reports are typically the ones that almost look like the pay stub. It has that much information per employee. And of course, what they're wanting to do is just compare the salaries and the payroll, just to see how they look each year. Have there been major swings in pay and so forth, and also the hours that are worked. Staff roster. This is definitely an item that owners in the diligence phase don't enjoy working on. So if you can go ahead and start it, and again, this would help you run your school more efficiently if you just keep an Excel spreadsheet and have different columns. And if you ever want a template, that is something I've already put together. So we're more than happy to share that, where you just have the employee's name, their date of birth. You can include their social if you want, or if you'd rather leave that out for your files. It is something that eventually a buyer will need for onboarding processes. So the date of birth, date of hire, their position. It's helpful to have, and this will help you with licensing as well, have their education level, and then also if you want to keep a separate tab for their training. Because typically owners will say, well, I've got a folder and it just has pages and pages and pages of their staff training. Well, you could really keep it in a spreadsheet and just keep track of the different staff trainings that they participate in for licensing and beyond. And you could even build it out more on the next line down. You see benefits, to keep track of who is enrolled with what employee benefits. I mean, obviously there are schools who don't offer any benefits. There are some that offer maybe dental, vision. They could be voluntary benefits, even if they're AFLAC. You can keep track of any child care discounts that you're providing to those teachers, any education funding. So anything that you want to keep tabs on, just create another column. And again, I'm more than happy to help build out one that's specific to your school if you'd like to start working on that now. Operations and purchasing. So this is going to be anything just related to the running of your school. Again, they typically will look at a 3-year period. So typically most schools, well, the majority of schools have some type of government assistance. There are some who don't participate in any subsidies, but this is anything from the food program to state-specific funding. So they're going to want to look at any, and that's going to be usually the application for that program. It's going to be any authorization forms by child. So that it is a lot of paperwork. Because they're going to need to see, especially if you've got different subsidy programs for each child, when they were approved, the amount they were approved for, and so forth. And let me just stop right here and address one thing that we get this question. Somewhere throughout the process, typically an owner kind of gets frustrated and says, why did they need all this information? But if you really stop and think about it, if you were buying a school, wouldn't you want to know how to run it? It's hard to step in and all of a sudden, let's say that you sell it, you step away, that new owner is in there, and then they get hit with lots of questions that they didn't know about different programs, different discounts. They need to know, let's say for subsidies, when those checks come in, is there typically a lag time, renewal dates? So it is a lot of information you're providing, but if you just think about it, that it's to help keep your school, the thing that you have protected, that you've grown, to help keep it running smoothly. That'll help get over just the frustration level of just all the data you're providing. And some buyers will work through a lot of the operation questions as partly conversations. We can do that via phone, or they'll do it with on-site visits so that you're not just constantly writing out data. It can be, they can collect that information and write it down for you in person. Vendors. This is another one where sometimes we get kickback where owners are thinking, why do they need the account number for this? Well, what a buyer is going to do is they're going to look at the different vendors that you use and the services that those vendors are providing, because they will try to keep any intact that they're able to. Now, let's say it's a national company that's purchasing your school. They're obviously going to have their own payroll. They're going to have their own HR, their own legal entity or legal firm, I should say. So they're not going to need your specific smaller contacts such as that, but they may try to use the local landscaping, or if it is a smaller buyer, they're going to look at the trash service, the cable, phone. So that is why that they have to get that information. Not that they're going to contact those vendors before time is right, but they want to get it all in line, and they'll review those, and then closer to closing, they'll work with you to reach out to those vendors about taking over certain contracts. One thing that has also come up with the vendors, a lot of times people don't have true contracts with vendors. There aren't many that you have a written contract with. So, but what you do want to keep in mind is providing kind of the handshake contracts that you have with people, or agreements. You want to provide those contacts as well for those vendors, because what if that vendor shows up 2 weeks after you sell the school and they tell the new owner, well, I come and, cut the grass every 2 weeks, but they don't know anything about that vendor because you didn't provide a written contract because you didn't think you needed to. Well, any verbal agreements you have, just remember, again, if you were buying that school, you would want to know any vendors that they work with. Insurance. This is going to be, aside from benefits are different. We talked about that earlier. You would still provide insurance. Let me back up. For the benefits, you would provide the policies, invoices to show who's participating and so forth. But as far as the operations, that's going to be any of your property and casualty insurance. And we need the policy contracts for those, the loss runs for workers' comp, for your liability, student accident. So your agent or your broker for your property and casualty insurances will be providing that information for you and to you. Inventory. This is another one. Some buyers want to have usually an Excel spreadsheet. And again, this is something that you could go ahead and generate right now. It's really good for insurance purposes. Let's say there's ever a flood or a fire, you know what's in every room. It doesn't mean that you have to list every book, every toy. You're going to start with the larger items, your tables, your chairs, your cribs, your changing stations, or changing tables. And then maybe as far as toys, it's going to be your larger items, whether it's a play set, a little stage in the room or theater stage. But keeping tab of that and any phones in the room, any electronics, that's going to be needed. The short list. I've had people say, it? What's it? Well, no, it's IT. And it's not it like the scary movie. I think that's a Stephen King movie, but it's IT, which is going to be your favorite category because it is short. This is really just about the systems that you utilize. Do you use ProCare? Do you use Tuition Express? Do you use QuickBooks? Do you what type of parent communication systems? It's just providing them the names of those and any information on them. It could be an inventory of any electronics you have in the school that, definitely on the computers and laptops, iPads, phones that will be part of the sale. They just need an inventory of those. And typically closer to closing, they will have someone from their IT department, if it's a larger buyer, if they have an IT department, to come in and help do an inventory, a closer inventory of those. But at the very least, you could say there are 8 laptops, there are 3 iPads, and so forth. Trademark. Some people actually have a copyright trademark for their logo, and various things. So if you have any trademarks or copyrights, we would provide that information. Okay. Oh, I just saw one quick question. That is a good question. Somebody asked, and I want to go and tell you this. Somebody asked if this presentation will be available or should they take screenshots. We always record our webinars, so a link will be provided probably within a day or two. And then we also, if you need a link to this, I can send you a PDF or a PowerPoint of the presentation. Okay, marketing. Know your presence. Some people don't even know, well, I don't know, most owners know their presence, but there are some who aren't quite sure exactly what this means. What does this mean? It typically is your social media. Most people just use social media for the biggest part for their marketing. Some people still use Yellow Pages. I mean, I've seen it here or there, or local magazines, local newspapers, parent magazines, just any way that you market your school, you're going to need to provide a list of that. Every now and then I will see where someone maybe has a contract with a marketing company to work on their website, their SEO presence, where they're making sure their website is kind of showing up more in Google. So have that handy, and especially if you have any contracts with any marketing vendors. And also a good sample of your marketing materials. If you have electronic versions of those that you can email, it can be your tour packets, it's even enrollment forms, anything related to the marketing of your school or enrollment as well. We go legal. Make sure we didn't skip a page. Okay, legal. Claims. Any claims that have been brought on by employees or from students, you're going to be providing information on that, your licensing and so forth. So you want to have information handy that we'll be uploading. Consumer complaints. Some buyers ask about this. It's typically going to be, they'll ask, do you know of anything that's been put on social media? I mean, if you are a business, chances are somebody has said something on social media or on Yelp, on Google reviews. You cannot control that. If you know of anything, you would provide that information. Liens. This is one I like to bring up. This is really kind of bitten us sometimes towards the end of a transaction. Your attorney can do something called a UCC filing, and this pulls up any liens a lot of times that you don't even know about. It could be something small, and you have to have those liens cleared up before a transaction can close. So if you want to be very prudent, if you know, okay, I'm going to sell in 2 years, number one, and I meant to talk about this at the beginning, let's talk about your team. Well, you're already working with us at Hinge. That's smart. Of course, we think so. But you also want to have, if you don't already have a bookkeeper or really a CPA, you don't have a CPA, and if you don't have an attorney, or if you have those but you don't feel confident in their ability to help you through this transaction, start now with asking around. You want to have a good team backing you, because they will be very integral in this process, especially if you're not very involved with your finances. If you don't run QuickBooks or have any historicals available, you're going to need to lean on your CPA and your attorney. You want to make sure you have a good relationship and an attorney who is timely. We definitely run across that where the attorneys can really drag out a process. And I mean, obviously that creates more billable hours. So make sure you have an attorney that you feel confident in, because there are going to be legal documents to have reviewed, and you will definitely want an attorney to review those. Real estate. We talked about this earlier just a little bit. So you may own your real estate, you may lease it. If you do, well, even if you own it, let's say you're paying yourself rent. I mean, any kind of lease agreements you're going to need to provide, or if you have the deed, information on property taxes, which definitely current year, sometimes 2 to 3 years of property taxes, and any HOA or CAM fees that you pay. Also, if you have any easements, you need information on that as well. Something that comes up as well is they'll always ask, would you have any hazardous materials? I mean, some schools, if you've been in your school a long time, there are things that could come up that maybe weren't an issue when you purchased your school, but now maybe are. So just know what materials are used or have been used, how you store those, and how you dispose of them. Let's see, how are we on time? So that is a quick overview on the buckets. But one thing I thought of since I presented this in Austin is what I have learned through diligence. The biggest thing I hear is I wish, the I wish hindsight. I hear a lot of owners say, wow, after going through this or while I'm in the middle of it, I sure wish I ran my school the way that I know it now. I've actually worked with someone recently who they know their school inside and out. So really the diligence process has been kind of fun with the seller because they're like, I do know my school. And it's almost like they're able to show it off. They've had no problems providing the information. So before you get into the process, what I like to think is, well, selling your school is almost like selling your house. When you're selling your house and you keep it spotless, everything's organized, you have it, minimalized. And when you're selling your house, sometimes you hear yourself or feel yourself saying, why didn't I live in my house like it looks like now? But that's like your school. Why don't you go ahead now? I don't care if you're going to sell in 10 years. Go ahead and think about, this diligence process just to say, maybe I should start tracking my enrollment. Maybe I should start tracking my staff information. So what I've learned is the biggest thing is the I wish hindsight. I do want to go back, speaking of enrollment, there are some systems that people are using that have an issue producing historical reports. Where if you run a report to show 2 years ago what the enrollment was, it's not going to show the correct enrollment for that classroom. It's picking up where that child is right now. It's very confusing. So here is one thing that I would really suggest to anyone who's looking to sell. It doesn't matter if it's in 1 year or 5 years. I would each month run a report to show by classroom what that enrollment is. Save it on your computer, print it out, no matter what. Have that so that you can show, I would say for a 3-year period, just kind of keep that in mind, that do I have on hand a 3-year historical of enrollment? Because they're just, technology, like I said, is not perfect and these systems aren't perfect. So if you were buying a school, you would really want to see what trends there are in enrollment. But go ahead and do that now. Start preparing where you're going to print or prepare by month, by classroom, what that enrollment is so that you have that handy. So let's see what kind of questions we have. Kathy, do you want to jump in here and moderate those, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Do you have any?
Let's see. Well, let's see. I've already asked, somebody asked, well, this was earlier, what happens if I don't have all these systems in place? So we talked about that. Just remember that, and we recently had someone, actually a transaction that just closed, and the person texted me and said, boy, if this school can sell, anything can sell. I don't think that people should think that they have to have the fanciest systems in place. It's all about organization. So like I said earlier, if you have your system in place, let's say it's not on the computer, you just have it on paper, it doesn't matter. As long as you keep that organization and those historicals, that will really help the process. And again, when we have questions and you don't have it, you just don't have it. You can't generate something just to have a piece of paper to provide. So there are workarounds.
So I have a question.
Okay.
The question is, do I need an audit, or is an audit helpful?
Oh, an audit of your financials?
Right.
Well, and some buyers will ask if you have audited or reviewed financials. I mean, it would help. You don't have to have audited financials, but it would help to know, number one, that your financials are in order. And running an evaluation, again, this goes back to just preparing. We don't mind. If you're listening to this, you probably know that we will run evaluation if you want to work with us. We don't charge for that. It's good to know, or maybe send us your financials to see how you're categorizing expenses. That helps, as well as where you are in your expense categories. Kathy's talked over and over about our financial spreadsheet that we can provide to you. It's something we can email to you where you're just plugging in 3 metrics: your 3-year-old tuition rate, your license capacity, your facility square footage, and it'll show you, based on those metrics, what a financially healthy school looks like. And that'll also show you the expense categories that we look at as well.
Okay, Carrie, what if an owner uses their business for personal expenses? How does that work?
Okay, so when we run evaluation, and we'll use this during the diligence phase as well, we pull out any owner expenses. So those are adjustments before we adjust those out before we value your business. So if you are running your vehicle through, or your cell phone, or your health insurance, IRA, anything of that nature, when we work with you to run evaluation, we're going to ask you what your owner expenses are. So that's something to have handy, and something that we will look at pulling out to correctly value your business. And those help your EBITDA, your bottom line. So we definitely want to know those. Here's one that came in, so hold on to one you have. If I have 4 locations, would I send the info separately or all as one? That is a great question. And then it follows up, should I keep track by location or as a whole? And should each site have its own account so I can track by location? That is great. We really want to see the financials by location, so that, it just really helps in many ways. So yes. So Kathy, what do you think about, I don't usually see bank accounts by location.
Most banks will allow you to code deposits and expenses by location. So it is very important, especially in the real estate valuation, for us to know the individual performance by location. And buyers will want to know that as well. And of course, if you are the buyer, you'll want to know that by location, so you'll know where you might be able to make improvements. So great question. Definitely itemized by location.
Let's see if there's anything else we want to speak to on the different locations.
One other thing to mention is that some expenses might cross over all 4
That's
locations, true. And there are several ways to do that allocation or not. So one way is to have a 5th financial statement that's just for, quote, overhead expenses or things that would be applicable to all 4. Another way would be to allocate them evenly, 1/4 at each school, and another way would be to figure out where they're actually used by percentage the most and allocate that way. And you can make that decision based on each individual expense. So, and all of those are perfectly fine, because as you know, we work with those and adjust them ourselves anyway. But great question.
Here's another really good question. If an owner is in the day-to-day operations of the business as the director, does this impact the seller's offer purchase price? Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah,
that's a good one.
I'm the phantom person over here now, but yeah, that's okay.
Good. Okay.
That's why I'm looking at you. Great question. So it's not a train wreck. So let me say that. But if think about it this way: if you were going to buy a business, you would want as little disruption in that business as possible. So if the owner is the director and the owner is exiting, immediately you have a gap in relationship between the owner and the staff and the owner and the parents. So in a perfect world, the owner has worked their way out of those relationships so that when a new owner comes in, the staff and the families barely even notice the change. So that's your perfect world. And that was part of our growing your bench that we did in the 4th month here. So you can pick that up at hingebrokers.com and learn more about that. Good question.
That's a good response. And just to speak to that again, if you go to our website and look for the master classes, if you scroll down to a little bit on that page, you can see a link for any of our past masterclass webinars. So that would be a really good one to go ahead and listen to. And during the process, if an owner is a director, The buyer typically will ask, well, is there someone on staff who you feel like would be a good replacement? Maybe you've had an assistant director who's worked side by side with you, for years and years. And they will ask you that too about the staff for any input on who you think. I mean, they all, let's back up. When a buyer comes in, they're not going to clear house. That just is it's not a good move. They're really not going to make any major changes, typically to your program, to your staff, for 6 months. Because otherwise, those parents are going to be freaked out. So that's not a good thing for them to do. But when someone is purchasing your school, they're going to want to know your input on any of the staff. If there are issues that they need to watch out for, that maybe they need to work on. So if you are the director and you're the operating director, they'll ask you if there's anyone on staff who you feel like would be good to transition into that role. So, what other questions did you have, Kathy?
Someone would like to know if they need the real estate information if they're only selling the business.
Yes, we do get that a lot. Well, and what would you answer as to why we provide? I mean, all right. Well, let me say this: if someone is going to be your tenant, they still need to know, about the facility. If they're going to be paying towards the property taxes within their rent, or if that's something separate. What else would you say to that, Kathy?
Yeah, they want to know the condition of the real estate. There might be less information to provide if it's not being sold, but you're right. They would either be buying the real estate or they'd be entering into a lease for the real estate. And so that person would want to know as much about the real estate as possible.
One thing I just thought about when we were talking about the corporate bucket, and it's usually a pretty simple bucket, but it's something that you need to think about. Are you the only owner, or are there 10 owners? I mean, before you get into the diligence process, or into a transaction with a buyer, you need to go ahead and have straightened out any logistics and legalities. So if there's a group of you, if there's 2 of you, whatever, you need to make sure that everybody's on board with this, or if you need to make any changes ahead of time.
I've got another great real estate question.
Yep, and another one just came in. So tell me yours, and then we'll.
Okay. Great questions, guys. How much should I pay myself in rent, and does that impact the value? I guess that means the value. Well, you can speak to the value of the business and the real estate.
Okay, so how much so read that again.
How much should I pay myself in rent? So, and how does that impact value?
Okay. Well, no matter what you're paying yourself in rent, you're talking about currently, but when we're valuing it. So when we run a valuation, the broker you're working with will have to adjust that rent to market value. Same thing as like a director's salary. Let's say you are underpaying yourself, overpaying yourself. We're going to have to work that out. Do you want to speak to what you're saying with the rent?
Yeah, so really it's irrelevant in the valuation. So most people own their business and their real estate in 2 separate entities, and they pay themselves rent. And the reason you do that is just for tax purposes, and you should listen to your CPA and do what they tell you and how much you pay yourself. But you can pay yourself $1 a year or every penny you make, and that does not impact the business or the real estate value, because what your broker will do, and what you should do if you value someone else's business for a purchase, is you should figure out, based on current industry standards, what that business can afford to pay in rent, and then that rent determines the value of the real estate. If you want to know more about that, go to our 2 years ago and 3 years ago. One of those was on real estate only. One of them was on valuation, and we describe in a lot of great detail how you determine the market rent and how you then use that rent to determine the real estate value. But to answer the question, what you currently pay yourself does not impact value, because your broker will adjust that in a valuation anyway, like you said.
I'm going to ask Kathy this next one, because this is a good one. Nobody's ever asked me this personally, and I'm not sure if I can speak to it absolutely. And this is a good one. If you're renting, let's say you're leasing your facility, does the landlord have a say on the buyer? Can they say no to the transfer of the lease?
Great question.
That is a good question.
Most likely is the answer, but it's determined by what your lease says their rights are. So most leases will give the landlord the ability to approve a new tenant, and most of the time it will have language that will say not to be unreasonably withheld. And what that means is that if the new tenant is as strong as you financially or stronger than you financially, then the landlord would not have the right to refuse. If it's one of the things we counsel people to be sure that their lease says, because you do want the ability to transfer your ownership in your business and not have the landlord block that. That's why we focus really strongly on buyers that are national or larger regionals, because they're typically viewed as more secure tenants, and most landlords don't have an issue with that. But that's a great question.
That's a good question. And before we even market your school, we call it our OM list. Our offering memorandum is the OM. We are going to ask you for a copy of your lease because the broker is going to review it and make sure and review with you if there's any information in there that we need to work on ahead of time. This is another good question. We get this all the time. At what point does the staff become aware of the transition of a sale of the business? This has kind of changed over even the past 2 years a little bit with buyers, but some buyers are require 30 days out, at least, don't you say 2 weeks out?
Well, there's some that will still do 10 days or even after closing.
We have done some that it's after closing, which is harder. Now, your management staff, your director, you're going to tell them, even if it's the day of but earlier, but typically a day before, you're going to talk to them typically before the rest of the staff. Also, what's going to happen is as soon as the staff is told, you're going to want to have an email already queued up that you can hit send or schedule when it goes out. It's going to go out to the parents, because you don't want a staff member somehow texting a parent or that information getting out and not coming from you. So a buyer, especially a national buyer, is going to work with you on a letter that you're going to send, a letter they're going to send. There is a lot of coordination on that. And again, it just depends on the buyer as to exactly when the staff becomes aware. But you as the owner, you have some say in that, and a lot of say. Not always on the exact time, but on how it's worked out. It typically is a meeting after, well, it's going to be after hours, but usually if you provide pizza or food, that helps, it just helps make it a little bit smoother of a meeting. Typically the owner is going to talk for maybe 15 minutes, and then it might be better for you to step out of the room so that they then feel comfortable asking direct questions to who's going to be the new owner of the school. Because they may not feel comfortable asking questions in front of you because they don't want to feel like they're slighting you, but they're just going to have normal questions.
If I could add a couple of thoughts to that, because great answer. A couple of thoughts are that I like a week or two before closing because it allows the buyer to be sure they have benefits and payroll under control, because you don't want to scramble and sacrifice that after the closing. Also, it honors your team by bringing them into the process. And a lot of owners will choose to bring their management in immediately during a process. So it's a delicate balance between knowing your team and what they can handle, making them a part of the process so they feel good, but also not unduly concerning them. The last thing I'll say is that on our last 2 transactions, we've had our sellers do their announcement to parents in the community through video that got released to social media instead of a letter, and we really like that. We have some examples of it if anyone's interested. So we're getting a little more tech savvy and getting information out a little faster now.
Well, and it's kind of like marketing, especially the younger parents. They like videos. So, I mean, if you look at marketing studies, they talk about videos of 90 seconds or less for sure, but those videos seem to be more popular. Let's see, we've got still some time. We've got some good questions. So if you have state contracts and sell your business with no other changes, can the contracted entity deny the sale or pull the contract?
Well,
that's a good question.
Yeah, so they can't deny the sale.
Yeah.
You can sell your business. They can deny the
Mhm.
contract. Typically, they have to approve the new vendor. You want to add anything to that, Carrie?
Typically, and it depends on your relationship. Let's say in Michigan, this is a good example. GSRP is a really big contract in Michigan, so you've got a contact with that, or any of the state contracts. You're going to have a representative that you work with. It depends on your relationship. You could just pose a very general question. One day when I'm ready to sell, what does that process look like as far as that new buyer applying for their own? Because they're going to have. I think as far as I know, you always are going to have to reapply. They're going to have to submit their own application for that contract. It's just the timing of it that you're going to want to know for sure. I have not heard of any agencies denying that the new owner. I don't think I've heard of any.
No.
Except, this isn't a denial, but what is it in Florida? If you are accredited, you pay no. Is it accredited? You pay no property taxes.
But that right. Doesn't. If you own the building.
If you own the real estate,
right.
You don't have to pay the property taxes if you're accredited. So that obviously does not transfer over. Here's another good one. Does Hinge typically get more than one buyer interested in the sale, so the owner has options and buyers? That is a good question. That is a great scenario. It doesn't always happen, but yes, it does happen a lot. So the broker will work with you on, we will give opinions on buyers and what might be a good fit, for your school, for your situation. It's a very individualized process. Know that this is never a cookie cutter process. Hindsight is always involved in a process because there's always going to be something that comes up, and you've got to realize that and realize we will get you through it, that there's going to be waves. But yes, there are, very often more than one buyer. So that does give you options as to who you maybe want to see as a good fit, and also just on the pricing. Do you want to speak to anything else on that, Kathy?
No, really good question. In a perfect world, we like multiple offers because that really lets us know that we have a true market offer. We do have situations where there's a school in a specific area or a specific type of school that only one or two companies are interested in, but we like to have at least several offers.
Mm-hmm. That's all the questions I had. Did you have any others?
I do have one more. We have 2 minutes, so let me slide it in here. This might be a simple one. Where do I start with diligence? What are the pieces to start with first?
All right. And so another question come in. So I'll speak to both of these. I can get these in. Where do you start? I say start now. Like I said, I don't care if you're 10 years out. And don't feel like, it doesn't matter if you want to start the process next month. It's okay. Doesn't mean you have to be that prepared. But if you have time, just start with Excel spreadsheets. I think that's the easiest way to start. Start just tracking things. You can have one for staff. You can have, or a different column. You can have one for vehicles, just to keep information handy so that you're not digging through files. Kind of like, again, selling your house, when you are just digging and digging and digging and driving yourself crazy trying to remember where you kept, I don't know, where do you have the VIN number handy for your buses? Do you have, are you tracking their service? Anything that you can think of. And if you want to have a conversation about this, I'm more than happy to jump on the phone with anyone just to kind of talk through your scenario and how you may be able to prepare so that it makes your process easier. That's really how you start. Just start with organization. Historicals, that's the biggest part. And probably our last question, we got 1 minute. How long does it typically take to get an interested buyer when you're working with Hinge? Well, that really varies. It could be, once we release the offering memorandum and any other kind of marketing materials, I don't know, it really varies. It could be a couple of weeks. It could be, what do you think, Kathy?
I think to know whether they're interested typically happens immediately. What takes a bit is that since we are working mainly with national and regional buyers, for them to come and see the school and make travel arrangements and then make an offer takes a couple of weeks. But typically we can know pretty quickly whether people have a general interest or not.
That's a good question.
Those are all great questions.
If you have any other questions, you should receive an email. Well, actually, there's going to be a survey that's going to pop up. So if you can answer those, that would be great. Kathy, you want to jump in here and go over the last little bit? Well, just so you know, let me change the screen so you have our next date. So September 26th at 1 p.m. Eastern, Kathy is going to discuss the models used to estimate the value of your business and the methods that we use, that we execute for our clients. But going back to your questions, if you have any other questions, you can submit those in the survey, or I think by tomorrow you'll get a follow-up email just thanking you for joining us. You can email us any questions and we'll get back to you. But thank you so much for joining us. Know that within this process, we're always going to be in it with you. We're accessible all the time. And that's why it's great to work with Hinge. We care about our clients and about the process. So thanks for joining us today and have a great day.